Hello, everyone, and thanks a million. You're all very, very welcome to this workshop. It's to do with creating what I've titled character chords, which will become a bit more clear as we go on with GarageBand on iPad. And you're all very, very welcome. You will need an iPad to be doing some of this, whether you're back and forth on Zoom and GarageBand on the one iPad, or you've got a couple of devices handy. So just a couple of housekeeping things before we kick off. If you could have, as I said already, if you could have your cameras and your mics off. If you do need to unmute to ask a question during the you'll see a timer will come up and giving you a few minutes to do some things, feel free. Also, if you can post questions in the chat, and some of the other ADEs, the Experience Music ADEs, have very kindly offered to try and field some of those questions if I'm in full flow, which I probably will be. I said the workshop is being recorded and will be shared publicly on YouTube and then through Twitter and things like this. And I said 2 devices would be ideal, but it's okay if it's one, if it's just your iPad as well. So for those who don't know me, my name's Owen Hughes. I'm a music, geography and ICT teacher, and I'm the digital learning coordinator of Loretto Abbey Dalkey, Loretto Abbey Secondary School, and a beautiful building it is too. And in my role as digital learning coordinator, I've been leading the iPad program there for 6 years now for my sins. So what are we going to do today? So it is a music session, but it's a music session that's designed for both for music teachers to show what maybe some ideas, if they're not used to using technology, what they can do, and how I'd be very interested how people maybe go on and develop this and make it bigger and better. But also for non-music teachers and non-music specialists to bring this into standard classrooms, whether that be in a primary school setting or in secondary and other subject areas. So the whole idea, though, is to give you a bit of an understanding of music. Like that's the whole, as you'll see as I go through, that's the idea, to like to understand and appreciate a bit more about music, not just to create it and not have any understanding. You'll be creating a melodic motif or a little melodic idea using the notes of a major or a minor chord. And we'll develop this into what I've termed a character chord. And we'll be some key areas to focus on. The type of chord you choose will depend on the character. And then things like the tempo or speed, the pitch, how high or low it is, and the instrument choice will be really key with this. It will definitely try and help you develop your skills with GarageBand if you feel you need to level up a bit there. And then there will be some ideas at the end for ways to apply this in the classroom. Hopefully that will become clear as we go through. So as I said, this is both for music teachers and for things like creative writing projects outside of this. There are workbooks. I put the links in the chat, but if you want to either screenshot that now or with your phone or a second device, maybe to scan that. Now, the top one is an iCloud sharing link, and the bottom one is a Dropbox link. If it's iCloud, you will need to make a duplicate of it. If it's Dropbox, you kind of need to figure out Dropbox's funny little things for downloading things, but it should be okay. But the links will be in the chat too. If you're posting on social media, I don't know, rather humbly, try to create a hashtag for this. It's character chords. And if you don't have my handle on Twitter, it's @_ehughes_. And I really regret all those underscores. So it would be important to start with saying, well, why am I approaching trying to teach students about chords in this way? Why should you bring music into your classroom? And why don't we just put it up on a whiteboard or a blackboard and write up some crotchets and quavers or quarter notes or 8 notes, depending on where you are in the world. So for me, one of the big things about music is we like to think we're super creative all the time, but the reality is that students in their head, even with the best intention of the teacher, music theory is often very, very separate to the creative side of things, with students performing or maybe writing their own songs. And I've been teaching guitar since I was 18, and I'm not that anymore. And been in and around it then and teaching in schools now for about 13 years now. So I kind of seen that from both sides. And it seems to me the more theory they learn, the less creative they are, or the less creative they are about applying that. So for me, one of my big aims as being a music teacher is to actually try and bring all of that together a little bit more. And so students are able to use music theory more creatively, but also use creative music making to learn about music theory as well and bring that together, because that's what real musicians do. And for me, GarageBand is a really, really big part of this. Not the only part of it, but it's certainly a really significant part. And it's a great way of making things a bit more accessible for students, and that they can get the sounds of things they could never do in the past, and ways to engage with sounds and instruments that could only be done quite passively by listening. So the whole idea is to bring these two together, really for them to make music and learn about music and become better musicians for that. This is inspired by another ADE, actually Kurt Kleinen from Belgium and now based in Philadelphia. And in April 2019, he had this great kind of online campaign called You Can Be My Hero, for using the Apple's app Keynote for just a very simple design task. And then we all sort of were creating these, and I had great fun with it and brought it into our classrooms. And here's just some examples that were posted at the time, with a couple of my own ones in here as well. But what really struck me was that how different all of these things could be, when really it's just like a square and then several notes. And how, depending on where we move or how we recolor these shapes, how different things can look, and how we can create these different characters quite easily. Or just by adding on a couple of simple little things onto these, how we can really change what we see. But the fundamental idea behind those 3 dots, those 3 circles, are the same each time. So that really made me kind of think about music, and I put music to some of mine, and it made me think about a chord. Now, for those who don't know, I'm not going to drown you in music theory today. I'm only going to give you the bare minimum to start creating music with these. A chord is effectively 3 notes that are in harmony together. Sometimes not actually, but they often are. And actually, here's a great graphic, but we're not going to look at all of these. It was very kindly shared with me by Samuel Wright, who's another AGE based in the Netherlands at the moment. And this is actually from his upcoming book. I think he's here this evening. He may share a link for his upcoming book. It's being published by Hodder Education, as far as I remember. And I have mine in pre-order. But we're certainly not going to look at all of these. But musics do have character to them, and they have different sound. So, for example, we can have a major chord, and they're typically quite happy sounding. Or we can have a minor chord, and they're typically a lot more sad and melancholic. If we play it much more loudly and aggressively, it can be aggressive and angry instead. So what we're actually going to do with these notes is we're not just going to play the chord and say, that's it, put an instrument on it. We're actually going to take these notes and separate them out and play them individually to maybe create some sort of a melody. But by virtue of the fact that it will be major, a happy sounding chord, we can create a happy sounding theme. Or if it's minor, we can space these notes out and create a more sad, melancholic, depressing kind of sound. Now we will look at bringing in the notes in between these as well, but I'm not going to stress that too much, particularly for the beginners. Music teachers, you'll be on those experienced music, you'll know what to do with those. So here's just a couple of famous examples, not the entire melody, but just to show you that this is a real thing in music. There's a lot of melodies that have some of their bases just on the notes of chords. So hopefully there'll be some familiar examples in there and a few ideas with different instrument sounds as well. So let's get going and we'll get started. So the way we're going to do it is there will be cases where I'll go through. If you have a second device and the iPad, you're watching a Zoom on one, you have your iPad free, you could follow along. But I then will have it sort of set up and scaffolded that there will be then time to dip into some of these things. But I've broken it up quite a lot, just particularly to facilitate those who aren't as used to GarageBand or as used to music. But I'll go pretty quick through the first few. Something that might be useful if, like me, you do not play piano and you're not sure the names of the notes, you can actually turn on keyboard note labels. And this is actually really, really easy to do. If you come out of GarageBand and go into settings, and then the easiest way to do this is just pull down from the top left and then search for GarageBand in settings. And then tap on GarageBand and scroll down to keyboard note labels. And then when you turn that on, you'll then just tap that to toggle it on. And then when you go back to GarageBand, then you'll see that all the notes are labeled there for you. So it makes it nice and easy. So first of all, we're just going to open GarageBand and we're going to start a new project. What you're looking for is the plus. Whether you're in the browse view and you tap on create song, or under recents or browse, tap on the plus. We're gonna work in tracks, not live loops. So make sure you're in tracks, and then just open up the smart piano so you see a view like this. If you don't see a standard keyboard, tap on the red icon on the right, the chord strip button, so you see a standard keyboard. So very simply, the C major scale, and I've numbered it here, but it should sound familiar as do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Should sound very familiar in that regard, but I've numbered it, and that will help the non-musicians a little bit. But it's very simple to play, just all white notes. And the reason I've gone with the numbers instead of that, it actually will make it a little bit easier as we go on. You can also set, it shouldn't be that necessary with the C major scale, but you can also set the keyboard to a scale. So if you're ever changing the different keys and you have to use some of those black notes for sharps and flats, you can just change it to a scale and only see the notes of the scale. So you don't have to worry about all the wrong ones. And secret hint, I do that a lot in the music I make in GarageBand, I'm not gonna lie. So you can also change the keyboard size. Beginners, I am not recommending this, but just if it does default to where you see a lot more keys on the screen and a lot smaller keys, just to show you where if you tap on the keyboard on the right hand side, you can toggle between them. But I would suggest leave it on the easy one like that. What will also be really useful is for being able to go between higher and lower pitched notes. And there's two ways to do this. In the center, where in a lovely script it says glissando, tap or slide on that, and you'll get scroll. Then you can tap and slide along on a note and drag till you get to the higher pitched notes. See here, that'll be very important depending on who you want to represent, which your characters you create. You can also use the arrows on the left, and you'll see +1, 0, -1, -2, and get lower notes. I would advise changing the section length to 4 bars. It's not essential, but probably you're going to do a relatively short musical statement with this, so 4 bars would be easier. So tap in the plus on the right-hand side, up along the ruler, and then just very simply go into section A where it says 8 bars, and then just use the downward arrows to toggle down to 4 bars. I wouldn't change it to automatic because you want this to be able to kind of loop around and it to be an even number. So my recommendation for now is 4 bars, but of course it could be 8, it could be longer. So setting the tempo, and this will be really important. If your character you're trying to create is Sonic the Hedgehog, you obviously want a slow tempo. If you're trying to create the tortoise from the Hare and the Tortoise story, you're going to want a slower tempo or a slower speed. So it's important to know how to do that. Tap on the settings kind of cog. If you see the metronome ticking away, you see that little blue icon? It defaults to 110 beats per minute. But tap on settings, tempo, and you can use the arrows to go up faster, and a top tip, hold on the number and slide up and it'll go quite rapidly, or downwards as well. And if you listen to the metronome clicking away there, you'll hear it now slower. You can also use tap tempo, but I'll let you experiment a bit with that. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes starting now to just have a look at some of those and maybe just to catch your breath. And then maybe be also kind of thinking, who would I create a character chord of? So I'll see you in 2 minutes. Okay, and we're just coming up on time now, so I'll ask you to come back in. We'll keep going. So we're now going to look at how to build a chord. Now, musicians, this is easy enough for you, but just maybe it might help you, kind of give you a bit of space to kind of think about how could you apply this in the classroom with your students. So if you can count, you can figure out a chord with the white notes on the piano or with the thing. If you know how to do skip counting, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 2, 4, 6, 8, you can figure out chords. Because the chord, in its most simple form, the chords, the notes that sound the best together and form a chord are when you skip a number. So 1, 3, and 5. So for example, if I start on C being number 1 and play C, E, and G, or 1, 3, 5. And then if we play them together, you'll hear that they sound rather pleasing together. But we can also separate those out and play them separately. And in any order we want. We can repeat notes, we can go faster or slower. That's all down to your creativity, what you do within that. So I'm just going to give you a minute just to, and I might shorten that a bit and just keep an eye on the time. I'm going to give you a minute just to have a look at that C chord, C, E, and G, or 1, 3, and 5. So C, E, and G, off you go. And we're just finishing up now, so we'll move on to our next one. And we're going to look at the other chord now. So we had our bright, happy C major chord there. And now we're going to look at our minor chord. So again, if you can count, you can do it. 6, and then it goes to 8 and 10. 8 is actually 1 again. If you notice on the keyboard, I have it labeled there as C4, C3. So we basically have do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, back to do, just comes full circle. So 6, 8, 10 or 6, 1, 3, but whichever way you want to look at that. So just to show you that in action, we have the A, C, and E, and we're skipping one each time to form that chord. And when we play it together, it's relatively high pitched there, but you can hear a darker, sadder sound to it. So again, I'm going to give you just a minute to have a look at your A minor. Off you go. So 6, 8, 10, or 6 and 1, 3. A, C, and E on the keyboard. So what I'm going to show you now, just to give you a bit of space for a second, are 2 examples that I've created for these that I would share with students when I'm doing these, okay? So one of my favorite things is Star Wars. So here's an example with Yoda. So hopefully we can hear that Yoda is clearly a good guy. He's the C major chord. Okay, so I've used C major to represent Yoda with this one. So this guy is Thanos. Thanos is the big bad guy in the Avengers, for those who don't know. And hopefully with my bad design work, he looks like the bad guy too. But just listen to the difference here. He's an A minor chord, so listen to the difference. And little Easter egg, listen to the very ending. So it's time for you now to choose your character. So let's just guide you through this and what you're going to do. So you need to pick a character, and it can be from movies, from a book, from a video game. Anyway, he sure does have swagger, Jared. I just see that flashing up in the chat. He can be from a movie, a book, video game, anything you want, any kind of media you want. I think pick someone you know. What I would say is don't pick someone ambiguous. Don't pick Batman and don't pick Deadpool. Okay, pick someone who's really clearly good. Okay, Superman or Wonder Woman or Harry Potter or Voldemort or whoever you want to pick, but make sure they're very clearly good or bad. You also then will need to, I want you to do this as an exercise. I would do this to students. Describe their character traits, their personality, their physical appearance, things about them. And then I want you to draw or design an image of your character. And I'm only going to give you a couple of minutes to do this, so it can just be a quick one, okay? Very quickly, I with Yoda said he was good. He's wise, he's old, he's small, but very powerful. He's optimistic, but he's also very calm and peaceful. And he's magical. He has the Force, for those who don't know Star Wars. Whereas Thanos is bad, very powerful and strong. He's old, he leads an army, and he's pretty much unstoppable. So if you have access to the workbook, you can actually fill it in on this. I'd love to see these. If you, on the right-hand side, you can tap into those white boxes and type in there. Or if you know how to do it, you could add an audio reflection there for choosing your character and describing your character. And then you can, just where the iPad is there, you can start drawing if you've got an Apple Pencil, or drawing on paper, and then tap the little plus button and go straight in and do that. And I have a page for the major chord, the good guys, and the minor chords, the bad guys, the more bluey purple colors. I'm only going to give you 3 minutes for this, just for time reasons. So off you go. Make a decision quickly. So I'll bring you back now. So with that in mind, you've chosen your character. You've kind of written down a little bit about the character traits, and maybe just got your kind of your creative juices flowing a bit and thinking about and drawing or designing them, making you think about that. So now it's time to think about what would they sound like musically before we try and create that. So are they major or minor? So were they good or were they bad? What instrument might be used to play that melodic idea? So you saw that I used the glockenspiel for Yoda, but I used really low brass instruments for Thanos. And what would they sound like? Major or minor? What would the tempo be like? What would the pitch be like? Are they young or small? They're probably going to be more higher pitched. If they're older, if they're really, really strong, possibly they're going to be lower pitched. If they're fast moving and young and energetic, they're going to be faster tempo. If they're older or slower, or just if they're like Thanos, they're kind of unstoppable. He doesn't have to move fast. Then it's going to be he can be slow. He doesn't have to rush for anyone. So they were kind of my ideas for Yoda. Use the glockenspiel slow, high pitched, quiet. I used some Eastern percussion because of the allusions with the Jedi in Star Wars, so like Buddhist monks and samurai warriors and into this. And I used an echo effect to make it a bit spacier sounding, for want of a better word. And with Thanos, brass, very loud, low pitched, slow and steady, and then these big, big, heavy drums kind of create a sound of an army and the idea of the power. So again, you have your workbook for this section on the right-hand side. What instrument could be used to portray your character, and how could this be done musically? So just take a couple of minutes now. Again, you have a major chord page and you have a minor chord page. And then off you go and do that. Think about chord, think about tempo, think about pitch. Okay. and we're going to move on. So I'm just going to walk you through very quickly how I the process of how I kind of created the Yoda theme and kind of break that down. And be all the time thinking about how you're now going to take those character traits that you've kind of written down and how you've just made note at this stage of how you might try and represent that musically. And that's really, really key. When a student asks me, does this sound good? Is this good? I ask them, well, does it match up with your character? Does it match up with their character traits? Does it match up with what you've written down for what you want them to sound like musically? And if it doesn't, well, it doesn't, and they haven't really achieved the task. So here we go. So for getting started then with Yoda, I'm just going to change the tempo first of all. So you can see I've set the tempo at a reasonably kind of slow 71 beats per minute. Make sure the metronome's on. Those who did the 1564 challenge workshop with Kiko, Doran will know that he would recommend turn it on, but that's for different reasons. Turn it on for this. So Yoda is going to be good. I'm using the C major chord and I'm just reminding myself of those. So I often then would just play around with these notes and kind of think of the ideas then that I have, okay? So next we want to make sure that we're playing in time. Very, very important. So I'd often press play and just let the metronome tick away. And then I might just kind of tune myself in and make sure I'm able to play in time with that music. So I might just play the notes along to that beat. Obviously we can have different speeds as well, but look how it follows the timing of that metronome. Okay, so how we build our character chord, I mean, it's just experimentation. I'm trying to show it to you here now, how I kind of went with that idea. I started off effectively by using the first two notes of the Star Wars main theme, which you'll hear it very clearly. Here we go, 1 to 5. And then just move up to a note outside, but back to the chord note, that's critical. So you'll start to see me use some other notes here as well, but you'll notice that I'm always focused on the 1, the 3, and the 5. Now for beginners, you don't have to go outside the 1, 3, and 5 at all. But if you do, it's very important, like that diagram I showed you earlier, about creating the face with the very, very simple 2 eyes in the mouth. We need those in recognizable places. So we need those recognizable 3 chord notes. And there's the theme then. So when you're ready and you know you have your theme, you know what you want to do, you want to record it. So obviously the big red record button at the top, hit that, wait for your count in, and then play it. Yeah, try and get your timing as good as you can, but if it goes off a little bit, that's okay. There are other ways to fix that, but we're not going to deal with those this evening. So now comes kind of into the fun bit. We want to maybe go to the instrument that we want. So as we said earlier, we'd start on piano, then change instrument. Tap on where it says grand piano, turn the metronome off at the stage maybe as well. Just let it play. I like to always play it and test out sounds, see what I like the sound of maybe. Maybe I said glockenspiel, but maybe I want to use something different. I would suggest scroll down to the end where it says other, and you'll see a lot of traditional kind of orchestral instruments here and lots of other ones as well, stringed instruments, guitars. It's a good place to start. And there are hundreds, thousands of different sounds in there, and they're all editable and you can tweak them. But I would suggest start off with something kind of familiar. But that's basically how you will change that sound. So what I want you to do now, I'm going to give you 5 minutes for this. I want you at this stage now to take 5 minutes to work on a very simple character chord melody. Keep it short and simple. Think of my Yoda one. It just goes bum, bum, ba-dum, bum, bum, and then repeats. That's all it is. And then record that in, change the instrument, but think about tempo and think about pitch. Okay, think about what your character is and what they are, how they're represented, and make sure your music sounds like that. So off you go, you have 5 minutes. I'll be in the chat if you need me. So I'm just going to very quickly kind of go through the idea for how I've added some of the percussion in. Now I decided to add drums. There's lots of different ways to add in drums and percussion in GarageBand or GarageBand. I tapped on the acoustic drums, went to percussion, and I chose the Chinese kit just to get a little bit of that kind of sense, as I said earlier. And they're really, really well done, these, and really well sampled. And I just created a super, super simple kind of beat with these to add in. You can also, though, use the virtual drummer, and it is just so good. And there's so many options in there as well. And so easy to tweak it on the left-hand side, the XY pad, and just changing different settings, changing different drummers. You can also choose the beat sequencer under drums, which is just amazing and really great way to understand kind of fractions and get the maths of music learned. The smart drums, which are highly underrated, they're great. Or there are literally hundreds and thousands of loops in the loop library as well that you can choose from. I did add in just some ambient strings. So I just want to use this as an example to show you how to maybe go about adding another instrument in there. But you'll notice that in my Yoda one, I actually only have 3 tracks. So when I'm back in tracks view, I'll tap on plus. And then I am going to use the strings now, not the piano, but I could just choose strings in the piano. So I just want a high-pitched idea. What I did is he's very small and tiny, but he's very optimistic. So I just wanted to put a high kind of ringing bell-like sound. And all I'm doing is sliding up and down, almost simulating how a violinist would very, very slowly and carefully bow. So I'm just going to hit record, and I'm just going to play that chord shape almost as if I'm bowing a violin. And all just on that one chord. So there are lots of different ways to do this, and a little trick, if you don't think your timing is great, go for something just that really washes over there and it's not very rhythmic. And if your timing and your melody's a bit off, it will sound okay. The Alchemy synth keyboards are, well, get prepared to lose hours in there. There's some lovely string pads and soundscape ideas that you can use. And all you need is the one chord, either that C chord or that A minor chord. Okay, that's all you need. The keyboard then, the synth pads as well, they are great. So again, I said you'll either need them, or remember the autoplay patterns if you want something a little bit more interesting and a little bit more kind of rhythmic sort of things happening with your autoplay pattern if your character's a bit more active. So you just choose one of those and sample them and then record it as well. Same with the strings, as I showed you already. Again, there are hundreds and thousands of different loops. I would suggest things like the synths, the strings, maybe some of the piano sounds as well. But it really depends on your character. I've already showed you Thanos's theme, so I'm actually going to skip on from him. I think we've probably had enough of him already, but just to show you a little bit of it. It's not that many tracks. Again, I just started with low-pitched piano. I brought in this eerie, and all I'm doing is playing one C note there. That's all. Sorry, A note, because he's in A minor. Those low brass, just copied and pasted my piano, right? Or I could just play it again, and just play it again. It's just based on the A minor. Really low pitch, just to give it and then I just threw in a loop at the end, and then there's a little snapping percussion at the end, a little Easter egg there. So for time reasons, I'm only going to be able to give you 5 minutes now to add in a little bit of your accompaniment. So I'm going to leave this on screen. So try and add just one chord autoplay pattern, okay? One chord, or a synth pad chord, or maybe an Apple loop, just that kind of washes underneath what you're creating. Percussion would be nice, not necessary though, it depends on your character. So off you go, just 5 minutes for that. Okay, now this is generally the point in the class where we get big groans, but we're going to have to move on, unfortunately. Okay. So just to remind you, if you are posting, do try and use that so and do tag me in it. That would be really great. So I just want to, as we start to kind of bring things home, just want to start to give you some different ideas for this as we wrap things up. So I really do see space for this outside of the music classroom. It can be as advanced or as simple as we want it to be. It could be just one instrument, 3 notes, and that's all it does, right down to kindergarten, to the youngest kind of kids that there are. Or it could be like right up to high school, studying Shakespeare and creating characters with this. Obviously then could then be used and developed almost like a podcast or a radio play, where students record their voice telling story and have the music playing behind their characters. Obviously in video projects or animation, where we really extend on the designing and the drawing, giving more time for this, or maybe brought into a history class with historical figures. Musicians, hopefully you're getting loads of ideas and how you can use this. We could obviously further develop it, make B phrases, change keys. Our opposing characters, are they in keys that are very, very unrelated to each other, C and F sharp major, and there's conflict there? Could we bring in additional chords, teaching kids about very simple ways of arranging, but developing listening skills by creating, not just by listening to develop listening skills, and a better understanding of chords. And I would generally try to do that all before they look at any musical notation. A project I did before, and some of you may have seen, was Jurassic music. It'd be very easy to adapt to this. You know, the nice, friendly, leaf-eating, herbivorous dinosaurs are the major chords, and the T-Rex, etc., are the minor chords, and they're big and loud and angry. You could have some character development. So take the same theme, but then change it. So for example, I'm a geography teacher. We could have an active volcano, which then becomes dormant. Tried to give that a sense of foreboding that he could wake up. And then what about then eventually extinct? And I've tried to go quite funeral-like here. And with the exception of the second last note, it's the same notes each time, but changing depending on the character. Now think about bringing that into character development from a book or from a movie or something like that, or something students are writing themselves. Also then, right down to the youngest, they could take toys or things in the classroom and make their own. So with the help of my 7-year-old, here's a very hastily made video yesterday. See if you can guess really quickly who this character is. So often, yes, so often with video projects, you often find people just dump, we'll just dump an iMovie soundtrack or a clip soundtrack on the end. And there's no thought really about the music that goes into it. So maybe if we could change that, wouldn't that be a great kind of thing? Just some additional resources. If you're not aware of it, check out the Everyone Can Create music guide. It's just been updated in the States, but from what I've been told is by September, the new version will be out, but version 1 is still amazing. Do check that out just to develop your GarageBand skills a little bit more. If you're not familiar with the Apple Teacher Program, I would highly recommend it. Both the Apple books that are downloadable, but all of the skills are embedded within the Apple Teacher Learning Center now as well. So there's loads to learn there about that. Also check out 90 Days of GarageBand on Twitter and on YouTube. So myself and 2 of my very good friends, Mary Kemper and Erica Moser, and our journeys that we did started around this time last year or so, maybe a little bit later, and for 90 days, 3 months. And if you want to dig really deep into GarageBand, that's going to be a really, really great way to do it. and follow along or do your own journey. So if you are sharing examples, hashtag character chords, and there's my Twitter handle. But all that leads me to say is thank you very much for joining me. I hope you got something out of it. Hopefully something you can bring back to your school or your colleagues, or that you can play around with yourself. Obviously, I've tried to scale it and make it accessible for everyone with loads of room for development. I'd love to hear where not just what people create now. I really, really want to hear them. But I'd love to see where people go with this over time as well, and to really improve on this very simple idea. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.